Hey everyone, welcome to Friday morning, the Park Howell Show, coming to you live at the international headquarters of Park & Company and the business of story. So great having you here today. You know what our program is about today? Let me find, where did I put that? Here we go. It's all about How Save the Cat. Have you heard of this? How Save the Cat. This book actually saved my ass and our client in 2011 at a gigantic conference, and how we used this screen writing book to create a 2-hour product launch that blew people's minds. And I had talked about this on the Business of Story podcast a week or two ago. And one of our listeners, Jonathan Barney, thank you for that, Jonathan, pinged me just the other day and said, man, can you elaborate on that? I heard a little bit of the story and how that worked. But how did you actually use Blake Snyder's 15 beats to screenwriting to create a product launch like you had never seen before? So we are going to cover that on today's show. But first, want to remind you, if you are a leader out there, chances are that you've got the talent to be really taking people where they need to go within an organization. But a lot of the times, what throws us off, the hurdles that we have to overcome, is how we communicate and connect with those folks. So have you ever had the feeling like, as a leader, people maybe weren't always listening to you? You had a hard time with presentations, sometimes even felt like maybe you were a little embarrassed in front of a crowd. Did you ever feel like the room owned you versus you owned the room? Have you been passed up for promotions because for some reason your dynamic personality wasn't connecting? Or maybe worse, maybe the worst fear of all is you're afraid of being boring. Well, we've all been there. We still suffer that from time to time. It's butterflies that puts us on the tops of our games that we use when we're in presenting. But what can get you over all of that is to perfect your storytelling techniques, to bring anecdotes and moments and little stories that can have a huge impact on your folks out there. And we, as you know, are doing the Storytelling for Leaders training here at Park & Company starting on Friday, May 26th. This is a 6-month Story for Leaders training program. We kick it off with a full day, intimate, immersive training right here from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at Park & Co. on Friday, May 26th. And then every week for the next 6 months, you will get a story assignment from us that you can apply immediately in your work. And every 4 to 6 weeks, we will be chiming in with conference calls and some online live webinars for just the folks in the training so that you can continue to grow and build your storytelling techniques. Now, it ultimately comes down to stories shape the behaviors that create the culture that drive epic performance in our organizations. And you may as well be the ringleader of that. I mean, this is a skill that is actually inside of you. We're just going to reignite it. And here's the beauty. The thing is, I will be there with you every step of the way, as well as Mark Schenk, the co-creator of Storytelling for Leaders from Melbourne, Australia, will be over here on Friday, May 26th at Park & Co. Now, we only have about 5 seats left for this 6-month training where you get access to 2 folks that our minds are nothing but storytelling, and we can help you ignite that one true superpower that we all possess, that power of story to help you nudge the world in any direction you choose. So feel free. Let's see, I've got a link here somewhere. My agenda got out of whack. Here we go. Here's a link right here if you want to learn more about that. I'm sure Lisa, great to have you here. Connect them with that link if you would on Facebook. That would be great. Now, Alessandra, nice to have you here. Thomas Williams, good to have you here. This Thomas was one of my very first students in the Executive Masters for Sustainability Leadership program at Arizona State University, where I have had the honor over the last 4 years to teach sustainable storytelling to executives from around the world. And Thomas is a great example of what this program does and how he brought his leadership to the forefront through the power of story. He was a teacher out at Scottsdale Community College, and he was working on their sustainability initiatives now out there. But now Thomas is in charge of all of the sustainability for the Maricopa County system. And if you're not familiar with the Maricopa County Community College system, It is the largest community college system in the country, and Thomas is now in charge of all of that. This is a guy that got his leadership on by really understanding how to use stories, how to find the stories inside his organization and grow to where he is today. So Thomas, great to have you here. Jonathan, awesome having you here. You're the reason for today's show. You're the guy that reached out and said, dude, all right, you told me about the Save the Cat thing. How did you actually use it? So we're going to talk about that. Why don't we just jump in then? One other thing I wanted to tell you about this week, I had really a great time, a very fun time with Sally Hogshead on our podcast. And if you haven't heard her, if you haven't listened to the show, she is amazing. Sally comes from a long history of being one of the top brand strategists and copywriters in the country. She spent 20 years in advertising and marketing, worked for the large firms, and has done a lot of the campaigns that you recognize through the late 80s, 90s, early 2000s. Sally went on and taking all of that branding expertise, started working with people on their personal brands and trying to determine what makes you fascinating in the eyes of others. And believe it or not, I think we all have a way of like poo-pooing our own fascination quotient. We are really fascinating in other people's eyes, and we have fascinating stories, whether we like it or not, or whether we accept them or not. Well, she has the Fascination Advantage assessment that she talks about that you can take. And this is different than Myers-Briggs or DISC or some of those other strengths finders, those kinds of assessments where it kind of tells you about you and how you approach the world. Sally's assessment is how the world sees you. And then she helps you identify the two best modes of communication, the two sort of personality archetypes, ways that you should be communicating that are most effective for you from the view of the world, from the outside looking in. And she also has that dormant one that says, you might not want to use this one because it is the least effective in how you communicate. So Sally talks all about it. It was a fascinating show. She actually took over my podcast because I had taken the fascination assessment and then she turned it on me. That was the bewitchery of Sally. But it was a great, great show. And I got to tell you, at the very end of it, she has the most amazing Tarzan yell you've ever heard in your life. Listen to the show. Within the show, there is a secret code that Sally has given us that all of you listeners out there are able to take her Fascination Advantage assessment for absolutely free. So check it out. Go to the show. What else do I have on my agenda before we dive right in the middle of this? Well, you know what? Let's bring in someone who really helped me start all of this. Parker, Howell, you around here somewhere? All the way in.
Hey,
from Hollywood. Hollywood, California. Ladies and gentlemen, Parker Howell here.
Hey, everybody. Who we got here?
You got Lisa.
Hey, guys.
Rita. Rita. Hey, Rita. Great to have you with us. Rita is one of our current students in the Executive Master's course. Alessandra, Thomas, Jonathan's here. We're having a great time. Anyways, you all have heard me talk about my introduction to storytelling, and so much of it came from when Parker was at Chapman. You were there, 2006?
2006 to 2010.
2006 to 2010. And by now you may have heard the story that I'm like, dude, Chapman's not the cheapest place to go to school. So when you're done with your textbooks, I want you to vet them and send them to me so that I can learn what they're teaching you about and building, a storyteller and how you could be the most, a great storyteller in the most competitive storytelling market in the universe, LA. So I figured if they're teaching you something, what would I get out of it? But from your years there at Chapman, and now you've been in Hollywood ever since you graduated, since 2010, what do you think has impacted you the most now that you've had the education and you've been in the film world for 7 years? What do you think the 1, 2, or 3 major things in story you pulled away from that education?
Okay, so, all right, story time. All right, let's get right into it, I guess. I suppose one of the most interesting things about story, and you touch on it a lot with your work, I know, and people are really uncomfortable with exploring it, but it's basically the idea of you have to go into the dark cave of the soul. You have to go and explore the shadow side.
What do you mean? The shadow side of your own personality or the personality of your protagonist, or are those one and the same? And step up a little bit so they can make sure that we can hear you here.
Yeah. So, basically, let's talk about the hero's journey for a little bit. It's like you take a guy who's living in the ordinary world and something happens to throw everything out of whack.
Yeah.
And he has this call to adventure. He has this problem, this crisis that needs to be solved. He then goes on his journey. He finds his mentors, his allies. He finds the tools, the lightsabers he needs to combat whatever this evil is. And he goes into the depths of the dark cave where he has to find the villain. But what he actually finds is he finds himself.
Yeah.
And in the darkness, he finds all these parts of himself that were hidden or latent or that he couldn't see. And that is really the discovery that we all need to be on right now, is to go in and find these dark areas where we can basically merge ourselves with our dark side and come back stronger and have the power we need to go and face the villains or the dragons or the demons of our lives. That is something that, even though it is
here, this bounces everyone, so they see it up there. That's okay.
There
See, yeah, we're not in LA. We're in Phoenix. So we don't have the earthquakes here. But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And so, even though that message is told to us over and over again in all of our story and our TV shows and our filmmaking, it doesn't feel like that's actually an intuitive sense. It feels more like what life is told to us is that you need to go and you need to get a job and you need to be safe, and that is actually not what we should be doing. What we should be doing is we should be courageously going into the darkness, into the depths, and finding our sense of self and recreating ourselves. And I think that's what the hero's journey is really about.
So let's just take, for instance, your journey over to Chapman back in 2006. Grew up here in Phoenix, Arizona, a pretty safe childhood, all in all.
Pretty safe, yeah.
And so you made the decision to go to this extraordinary world of Southern California and dive into this without any assurances of being successful in it. So it wasn't like you were going to fight demons in Baltimore and Lex Luthor and that bunch. So, but you were on this journey, this quest to find something else. Does the hero's journey still play into very positive quests like that versus the negative ones that we just kind of covered?
I mean, I suppose when you think about that kind of basic quest, that initial kind of archetypal story of leaving home, it's hard for me to imagine that you won't go into some kind of darkness, that you won't be put up against tasks that you're not particularly suited for, that you need to find mentors and weapons and tools to give you the strength to overcome. If you are pushing yourself on your edge, if you are leaving home, if you are going and following something, like, you're definitely going to be challenged.
Yeah.
That is a fact of life. And I think even if you do stay home, you're going to have challenges too, but those challenges aren't going to be the same. Those challenges are going to be dealing with yourself, but not having this whole external world of chaos with which to bounce off. You're going to have an internal world of chaos with which you're battling. If that makes any sense.
Well, now we all, and our listeners here, are often, we're in advertising, marketing, content development, insurance. We're all out, quote unquote, selling something. So how do you think what you have learned and what you're practicing in Hollywood now and creating stories and films, how does that hero's journey play into our everyday lives when we are trying to connect with audiences? And the cacophony of communication that is the attention economy these days, it's so hard to cut through. One of my experiences has been when you use basic story structure, it has a way of tickling the reptilian brain and gets them to snap to attention. They look at. So have you seen this story structure that really connects on a very basal, primal level, coupled with experiences that we can all relate to, and Hollywood uses to make movies that we can use in our own storytelling to advance our missions further, faster?
Cool. All right. There's a lot in that question.
Yeah, I know. It kept going.
Yeah.
I had to kind of go boom and get myself to stop.
So I guess I'm going to bring it back to the structure that you've been working with. And we were going to talk about Save the Cat, which is basically, we're going to, that if you want to go deep into that, it starts with, Freud and then goes into Jung and Joseph Campbell and Joseph Campbell's heroic architecture, which then ended up with Blake Snyder, who is basically showing how that's been used for years in the film industry. And then on top of all of that, you've created your work, which is basically taking that same kind of monomyth architecture and bringing that towards businesses. And I think one of the most powerful things that you've done in kind of remapping this for businesses is that you've identified that the business itself is not the hero on the journey, but what the business itself is either the mentor or the access to the tools, the guide, to the hero who is their audience. And I think that's really one of the most insightful things that you've done in your whole creation of the map of this monomyth. So basically what that does is that changes the perspective of the audience. That says the audience is the hero. They are the one who has their dragons to slay, their life that is out of whack, that your company needs to come in and then help them on their journey. And I think in refocusing that, I think that's been one of your most powerful insights.
Yeah, well, thank you. And for those of you that don't know the hero's journey or the monomyth that Joseph Campbell created, he was America's foremost mythologist, and his was 17 steps that takes you through this whole journey. And if you really want to check it out, just watch the very first Star Wars, because George Lucas used it as his thesis when he graduated from USC, wrote the Star Wars film, and the rest is history. And you will see the hero's journey step by step by step through that. But you know what? They could even go back and watch The Wizard of Oz, which was done in like 1939 when nobody had even known the hero's journey was there. I mean, Campbell hadn't identified it as such as it, back in 1939. And yet when you watch that movie, it follows it exactly. That's what really struck me about this universal structure of the hero's journey. When Parker first gave me Campbell's book, was A Heroes with a Thousand Faces. I mean, it's a tome like this thick, and it is, for me anyways, impossible to read. Did you ever get through that whole thing? It's so academic.
Yeah, it gets a little wild at certain points, but yeah, you got to read that stuff, that philosophy little by little. Yeah,
you digest it little by little. But then what happened is one of the other books Parker gave me, as I mentioned, was Save the Cat. And what was so fascinating to me about Save the Cat, and by the way, in the whole realm of things, so he's taken the 17 steps, boiled it down to 15 steps, and I took it from the 15 to 10, remapped it for business, as Parker said. But about the time you were graduating, we were working here at the agency on a client, Forever Living Products International. They were my very first client, which launched us in 1995, actually. And so every year we would do this big event called the Super Rally. And the Super Rally is their international event, brings all of their distributors and sales folks together for a big celebration. We do product launches, business training, and then they're pinning people and they're leveling people up and they're celebrating them. So every year, our biggest challenge with the Forever Living Products, and you worked on them in high school and in college, you were an intern for us, but you were also doing all the graphics and animation work. How many Super Rallies did you work on?
Oh, I don't know. How many Super Rallies did I work on? So 16, 17, 8, I don't know, probably around 5 or 6.
5 or 6. So
I guess
Parker was always behind stage with us, would build out the graphics and the animation work and whatever. If you, by the way, want to see some of his work, just go to his name, parkerhowell.com, and you'll be able to see all the work he's done over the years. But really, really great stuff. Here's the problem we had with each one of those rallies. These folks, we had 3,500 of them showing up, and in this case, it was in 2011 in Washington, D.C., and they would come from 140 different countries. And we would be transcribing everything from the stage real time in 8 different languages. So you know there's a language barrier going on too. Plus, they broadcast it live on the web. Our biggest challenge was when we would launch this Thursday morning, people had just arrived Wednesday night, so there was a ton of jet lag going on. We had a 2-hour window that Thursday morning to hype them up, launch new products, and get them excited about the afternoon sessions. Well, we would start losing people. Remember, we would have people asleep in the front row. We would have people start.
Well, they traveled from halfway around the world.
Yeah, so they were wiped out. We did all of this work. The client spent a lot of money to have all this stuff, and we would just be sitting in the back with our cameras checking out the people asleep, and it just drove us crazy. So as I was studying this, and the client was in here prepping for that particular show, we were trying to figure out what could we do to make this way more interesting. And I had finished Save the Cat about 6 months earlier and was working on it with the story cycle process. And I basically said, let's take Blake Snyder's 15 beats, and you can find this online. There's just the 15 beats to every great screen play. And by the way, Blake Snyder was one of the top screenwriters in Hollywood in in the 1980s. He sold more screenplays to Hollywood around family genre movies than anybody. So he knows what he's talking about. So he writes this, and we just went through it and we said, let's actually draft a play. Let's draft a skit for 2 hours that takes somebody, and we got a professional actress to do this, and then we all around her supporting staff were all the corporate folks. And we said, let's show the lifespan of a Forever Living Products distributor. This is a network marketing company, a company that encourage you to strike out on your own. And as we took her through this, building her own business, the highs and the lows of it, doing everything Parker just talked about overcoming her own demons, following Snyder's 15 beats, it was like remarkably successful. When we were done, when this show was over, I mean, the place was still packed. Nobody was asleep. We got a standing ovation. When we broke for lunch, we had distributors coming up to us and a client coming up to us and saying, "Oh my God, that was the best presentation we've ever seen for this." I don't know what you guys did, but it was amazing.
And it was somewhat of a risk too, right? Like if it fell flat, you probably would have been fired. And I mean, you wrote a corporate multi-level marketing opera, basically, of this woman and her journey, and you just followed the steps. And I have never seen an auditorium more wrapped.
Yeah,
like, really, it was.
And we didn't know. It was a bit of a science project for us. And you were in the back, and you were throwing up all the videos and that sort of thing. What struck you about that event? Because you had been to 4 or 5 of them before that product launch.
I just felt the energy of that room. That energy of the room, the people were on edge. It reminded me of being like a little kid at like St. Teresa's when you had those days where they bring in the TV on the big rack, yeah, and you watch a movie for whatever reason in class, and everyone's just waiting, and that's what it felt like. But for an international audience, for people who are literally listening to the script being translated live by a bunch of translators who were in the background, it was really powerful.
Yeah, so I'm going to take you through it really, really quickly. I don't have the actual script in front of me, so I'm going to go purely by memory, but I know it. I remember it pretty well. We, like I said, found this wonderful actress out here in Phoenix, and we brought her out because we felt like we needed a professional to hold everything else together. But the corporate team was fantastic, and they just ate it up. They got into character, sometimes themselves, sometimes they had to play other characters. So in Snyder Save the Cat, he says, you got to have an opening image that is going to be paid off in your closing image. They got to be opposites of each other. So if you open dark, in a dark, foreboding place, you want to finish in bright sunlight. So you have this visual transformation. So what we did is opened up on our actress, Jill, and she was in a little cubicle cranking away, and you could see she was frustrated. She was tired. She didn't like her job. She was answering to the man. And in this case, her boss was R.J. Lloyd, who is the chief counsel for Forever Living Products, and he played it beautifully. He came up like the mean old boss and was like bossing her around and whatever. And so we started her in her little confined world, and she knew there was more to life than that. So that was basically the opening image. And then that was the setup, saying, here's somebody, like you were saying earlier, that wants something and venture out, but does she have the guts and the wherewithal to go and do that?
And she's very much stuck in the ordinary world. Really, a lot of the hero's journey is coming from the ordinary world and stepping into this extraordinary world.
And we wanted to set the stage. We want to set the theme. So we got the setup, and as Snyder says here, theme stated, what your story is about. So you want to let everybody in that audience, we did anyways, know what to expect over the next 2 hours. And that was transformation from this miserable world into an extraordinary world where you are the boss. I mean, it's just that simple. So I think theme overall is just simply transformation. If you got the guts, we're going to help transform you. And we did that through the script and how she was kind of pushing back at her boss or whatever. Then we have a catalyst. So remember so a catalyst in Hollywood is what? That inciting incident.
Yeah, I mean, what is the catalyst? The catalyst can be the chaos that comes in. The catalyst can be the call to adventure, basically, right? Yeah.
And in this case, the catalyst was her boss was going to make her work another weekend, and she wanted to get home to her kids and have her own time. And that was the catalyst to say, I'm not taking this anymore, and she's going to take off. And by the way, we did this in all great fun. So RJ didn't look like a total jerk up there. Everybody knows and loved RJ. Very likable guy. So it was fun to put him in the mean guy role because it was so counter to what everybody knew him as, but everybody loved it because they leaned into their seats saying, I get this. This is me. I've been there. relate to this protagonist. Then we get into debates. And now debate is, she asks herself, should I, shouldn't I? I really want to go and have time. I want to be my own boss. I want to build my own career. But, I don't know if I'm smart enough. I don't know if I'm fast enough. I don't know if I can make this happen. Oh, my God, what if I don't happen? So it doesn't happen. So they're battling this back and forth, and we were doing this on stage. But as she was having that debate with herself, do you remember we had her literally get up and start moving out and away from the cubicle? So we had that visual storytelling. And I think at that point, too, you guys had even changed the background. The first one was a very staid, single image of an office. So everything was very constrained, very unanimated. And as we got her doing her own debate, we got her to leave that little cubicle world, and you started to bring in just some subtle animation happening in the background, almost like a dream state, but we wanted to move the audience somewhere with the story and see her asking all the same questions they asked themselves when they were going to join Forever Living Products. Remember that? That was so much fun. So that's really kind of set up of Act 1. We know we've got a catalyst, we've got her moving, she wants something. Then we go into break into 2. This is Act 2, where it becomes the B story. She gets introduced to some other folks from FLP. A distributor brings her to an opportunity meeting. She tries some of the products. So it's a bit of a vignette of how this thing starts going along. And then we get to the next step of the promise of the premise. And in this case is we've set up this whole theme of transformation. So we have to really start showing her transform. She joins FLP. She starts selling. She's loving the product. She's loving her new life. She finally gets bold enough to say adios to her old job. She was doing it part-time. And by the way, this is what all their distributors do, so those sitting in the crowd could relate to all of this stuff. And then she moved on, and she started having great success with it. And I remember some of the fun stuff we were doing with the animation in the background. Everything just kind of picked up. It was a little bit brighter. And at this point, too, we would start launching some of the products. Remember that? It was a while ago.
It's been a minute, but yeah, it sounds familiar.
But the promise of the premise, as she's building her company, we launched, I think, 4 different products. So she was introduced to a sunscreen, and she would go out, and we would then take a deep breath in our presentation, and we'd play a video about the sunscreen. And then that would lead us into a next chapter that she would be talking to somebody, and she would be building more distributors around her, and then launch yet another product. So it becomes, what do you call that? It becomes kind of a montage.
Yeah, or you kind of call it the fun and games part of the story. It's like, oh, we get to see success. We get to see what it feels like to be having fun on this journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you get to the midpoint of the overall script. And in his book, Snyder talks about, he knows exactly where a midpoint has to happen on the pages of the script. I think he said a screenplay is typically 110 pages long. He says the same number of pages as a jockey is heavy. So I guess a jockey's 110 pounds, 110-page screenplay. He says, I can't remember, it was like on page 60, you have to be at the midpoint. And the midpoint explores 2 things. Either the very high of the story, like, oh my God, this is so great. I mean, I can't even imagine something going wrong. Or the lows. Oh my God, this is so terrible. How am I ever going to get out of it? Because you got to pay off those 2 poles. It's either high or low. In her case, and Jill, our distributor, her high was she made it to this manager level, and she was killing it. She had a lot of success. She was a natural at this. She was just having so much fun. She couldn't possibly imagine how things could go wrong. So what does she do? She takes her foot off the pedal. She starts getting complacent, like we all do, like we can all relate to. All of a sudden, another distributor is from a different company is introduced, who starts peeling away some of her customers, some of her own distributors, and she starts on this spiral. And so then we get into the bad guys close in. That's when I'm talking about the competition starts showing up. And the bad guys between her ears, too. She's like, I knew I couldn't do this. I knew this thing was going to blow up on me. And then you get to that point, and that is all is lost. She comes to that defining point that all managers go through in Forever Living Products, in that I don't know if I'm going to continue on. I don't think I can do this. I think I got to go back to my old way of living. And the company loses quite a lot of distributors at that defining point. So they want to recognize it. And kind of what you talked about before is pay homage to it, right? So we got her to that point of she's just about ready to quit. In fact, I think she does quit, only to have kind of her mentor or guide show up in the form of another distributor, someone within the organization that says, no, we've all been there, Jill. We know what it's like to hit that manager's point and then have it all fall apart, our own undoing. So let's pick you up. So she goes to the dark night of the soul. She determines that, she needs to be true to herself and true to her entrepreneurialism. So she says, look, I'm going to forge on. We then break into the third act, and this is all about the finale. You see her grow. She becomes one of the diamond distributors, one of the top. We're changing her wardrobe. She comes out. She gets pinned by Rex Mon from the actual CEO of Forever Living Products. And over the course of 2 hours, we literally have taken her from that confined little cubicle in her office to this big, grand, open stage that she's on right there in Washington, D.C. for everybody else to see. And we've taken her from that dark world into now this world of unbelievable opportunity. And every step of the way, all those distributors could relate to her because they had all been with her.
Every step of the way, yeah. And then you have all that drama that's embedded in there. You have with each step, is she going to be able to break out of the office? Is she going to be able to overcome her husband worry for her in choosing this new life? Is she going to be able to overcome the competitors who are taking her business from her? And every time you're creating this dramatic beat where I don't know what's going to happen, and it just propels you from one part of the story to the next, which is also what propels her from her journey of being totally ordinary to a place where she is up against the really difficult parts of her life, where she actually gets to find herself and her true inner strength comes out. And as she's realizing this strength internally, over time, she's making these decisions and these actions to become more powerful until she's not only internally powerful, but then recognized at the end by her community, by Rex Mon, who gives her accolades and her giant check. And, and she's come full circle.
Yeah. And what's so cool about it, too, is I think why it really kept people in their seats is this universal structure of the story, but visually, even if they couldn't understand us or couldn't keep up with the plot because of the translation going on, and a ton had to have been lost in translation, that they could relate with that protagonist. They could relate with Jill, the paid actress, because they had all been there and done that at some point or other. And I mean, how important is it for your audiences to be able to relate to the protagonist and have the story you're telling be as relevant to them as possible?
I mean, it's huge. And that was probably why this was even more successful than I expected it to be, is because the message that you were selling was so personal to such a giant, I mean, what was it, 3,500 people who were there?
Yeah.
It was so personal. It was so connected to them. It was their life story. Mm-hmm. And that resonated. And it was really a wild thing to behold. Because you go to a movie and everyone's on their different journey. Everyone's doing a different thing. They're looking at Superman up on the screen and they can kind of relate, but you actually can't even really relate to Superman because it's not even really a human.
Yeah.
But yeah, what you had hit with that was you had hit the exact myth of those people that they were living into. And it was really fascinating.
It was pretty cool. And then that afternoon, what we did after lunch is I took to the stage for a 2-hour storytelling workshop. And literally, it was the very first time I had presented the story cycle to a sales team like that and walked them through beat by beat what they had experienced. I boiled down the 15 steps to the 10 steps of the story cycle, took them through it, showed them videos we had produced in the past that used the story cycle system that they had, appreciated, understood before, and then got some of them up on stage to start using the system to tell their stories. And I think, Parker, in all of it, what it underscored to me is what Campbell had found about this universal structured story. Because even if they didn't understand everything we were talking about, they got the story. They understood the pattern of it, the sequence of how it went down, and they could completely relate to it. And to me, that's when I was like, oh man, this is absolutely quite magical.
Yeah, I mean, story, it's worldwide. It crossed every culture. In Papua New Guinea, I'm sure that story is one of the most effective avenues. It's that monomyth that we all share. It's that self-discovery, that actualization that we're all going for, that transcends culture. It's like you say, you want to relate something to someone, you don't give them facts and PowerPoints and details. You gotta write a story, write something that they can then, overlay with their life, someone that they can relate to, some human being that they can put themselves into.
Yeah.
And that information becomes infinitely more digestible, infinitely more fun to explore and experience.
Yeah. So I know that's a long-winded way of taking you, but Jonathan, you asked for it. Do you guys have any questions? I see it looks like we might have had some audio problems first, but hopefully it's still working.
Seems like they said it was.
Yeah, we're good. Random thought is, oh, here we go. Mad Lib's story structure. Is Mad Lib's story, you know what Mad Libs is?
I know what Mad Libs is. I suppose Mad Libs is a story that's taken apart and made into a puzzle. And then, yeah, I suppose there's a certain story structure to what's going on, and then you play with the elements and it becomes a game.
Yeah.
That's my theory.
All right. Any other questions for us out there? Let me see. I know we covered an awful lot. Parker, while we're waiting on any questions coming in, what are you up to these days?
What am I up to these days? So
you're in town for what?
I'm in town for Arcosanti Forum, which is a big tech and art festival that's over at Arcosanti.
And it's done by Skrillex or produced by Skrillex?
Yeah, it's produced by Skrillex. I'm kind of a friend of one of the founders, and it's like this kind of intimate, invite-only kind of thing. We're going to go see Skrillex tonight out there, and I don't know, it's just kind of an exploration. I'm not entirely sure. I suppose it'll be kind of like a small Burning Man, lightning in a bottle type of crowd, but maybe geared a little bit more towards industry tech people. Yeah. So I don't know. Really excited. I'm out here with Teddy Saunders, and we're going to go tear it up, maybe spin some fire. Now,
you and Teddy, speaking of spinning fire, you guys created a bit of a sensation at Burning Man back in, I think it was 2011, wasn't it?
Yep, 2011.
And this is before you saw a lot of video coming out of Burning Man. There was a little stuff here and there. And what did you guys do in 2011 that our listeners might want to go and check out?
Yeah, well, I guess the thing about Burning Man is, yeah, you get little bits of video out of it, but it's such a deep experience. There's so much wealth to it that it's like, how do you find the words for what it really is? Because it's this whole other universe of art and creativity and a temporary autonomous zone where people get to go and create whatever they want to create and be self-expressed and all of these things. And it's like hard to put words to. But what we came up with is Oh, the Places You'll Go, which was Dr. Seuss's final book that he was basically writing on his deathbed, which is the hero's journey in a sense. It is a bit of a monomyth of what it's like to go through life and the ups and downs and the exploration, and it's whimsical and it's fun, and it's like exactly the vibe of Burning Man when you're out there, because it's whimsical and it's confusing and it's interesting. And so we took Dr. Seuss's words, and we had all these wild characters of Burning Man. We went throughout this whole giant festival and found these characters in these wild art projects, and we had them recite Dr. Seuss's words, and it blew up and went viral. And then Burning Man sold out ever since.
Well, and I'm looking at it right now on YouTube. You got 3.4 million views since then. And I think is kind of interesting with this. What was fun for me is when you guys launched it, I could watch something go viral real time. I'd never seen that happen before. So I think I literally spent 3 days on YouTube watching it being picked up, being shared, being the comments that were being shared. And what I learned from that is that you truly have to have a tribe, like Seth Godin says. And you guys had this tribe of burners that either had been there or wanted to go, that this story spoke uniquely to. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I guess ultimately the burners were the base audience. It was for all these people who kind of had this experience before, and who were maybe also searching for the words of trying to relate it. And it's hard. And they ended up actually pushing it from there. And then, that story structure, it's, even though it's personal to one audience, it's also personal to all sorts of people. And then, the rest of the internet took it, Reddit and Huffington Post, and then it just became a way to kind of understand this wild happening out in the desert that no one really could ever look at from the outside before, other than be like, I don't know, it's people in costumes in the desert. I don't get it. It gave it this journey,
And I'm looking over at it here too. You have 42,585 likes and only 732 dislikes. So I think is interesting to me is when you read the comments. I mean, it truly moves people. And really the dislikes are just the trolls you typically get, you know, in something like this. Now, one other thing I want you to tell the listeners about that I thought was really, really smart and an interesting little social study is how you guys crowdsourced the music and got an original score for Oh, the Places You'll Go. You remember that story?
That story. I mean, we did a Craigslist ad and we found a guy. I'm not sure what that story is that you know.
Well, yeah, but the story that resonated with me is they put this Craigslist ad out there and they said, look, we got this film. Here's a little chunk of it because you guys didn't want to release the whole thing. You gave them like 2 minutes of it. And I think you guys actually had some boundaries. If you get to write it, we'll select the writer. There's no money in it for you, but we're going to share it with the world. And we get to edit it as we see fit. You have to follow our direction a little bit. So, you know, they had a lot of stuff going against them if you were a composer out there. But you found this guy, I can't remember his name, out of New York, and it is beautiful. It's magical. And then you guys have even had a lot of people on your comments ask for the music. In addition to the video, who did this? So I loved it because I thought it was such a wonderful way to crowdsource creativity, and in this case, audio storytelling. And it was a beautiful, beautiful score that went to the track for Oh, the Places You'll Go at Burning Man.
Yeah, Darius Holbert was the composer out of New York. When he came on, the whole thing just sung in a whole nother way. I mean, music really is the emotional heartbeat of filmmaking. It really is the part that helps navigate the people as to how they should be feeling about this. You know, so much of what a character is, so much of what Darth Vader is that Imperial March when it comes in. Bum, 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 ba-da, bum, ba-da. Like and what's nice about it is compared to the visual aspects of story, which a lot of people, you know, you take in consciously, a lot of times that music is working subconsciously on your audience, which is really powerful.
Yeah. So you're going to the Tech Fest. You've got all the places to go. You're doing a lot of work now in virtual reality. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing there.
Yeah, so I guess the real kind of breakdown of what I've been doing in Los Angeles for the past 6 years now is basically my own independent shop where I direct and produce whatever kind of commercial work, you know, freelance, do that, television, motion design. I kind of got into the television world through concert visuals for like Dancing with the Stars, and that's led to other wild concert visuals. One of my favorite ones that I've done recently is for Excision, which is this wild kind of machine post-apocalyptic dubstep, and his whole stage is a giant projection map stage where he's basically flying around DJing in all these crazy robots that are basically coming to kill. And it's a really wild show, and so I got to do some work with him, and their creative director just brought me back on for that to do some more work for him. And then all of those projection mapped visuals were basically you're kind of blurring the line between the digital world and, you know, the physical world, has all led kind of nicely into the virtual reality space. And so I got into virtual reality with a production company out of Glendale, Vanishing Angle, and we did some work on Matt Pat's new series, which is Global Gamer, where Matt Pat is basically...
Who's Matt Pat?
Matt Pat is one of the biggest YouTube celebrities ever, and it's interesting because a lot of...
is that the gamer kid dude that gets on there and talks about?
Yeah, he's really cool. Basically, he made a name for himself because he's got this intellect, he's got this idea of physics and science and everything. And what he was doing is he was taking the physics of video games and he was saying, are these real? Can we do these in reality? And people loved it. You know, people love video games. The younger generation is really into it. And he took off. YouTube Red picked him up because he was such a star. And we did a show called Game Lab where he was going out and living, you know, these virtual games, but he was living them in real life. So we had him go and do parkour like Mirror's Edge.
And what's parkour?
Parkour is free running. It is basically a way of traversing through the world, seeing the world, almost like a skateboarder would see the world, but without a skateboard. And life kind of becomes this park for you, which with it you can play off. You can run up the sides of buildings and do flips and all of these things. And so he would bring on these different guests from the YouTube world, and they would all go and do parkour, or they'd go sword fighting. And And I think it's really interesting leading into the virtual reality world, because people like, what's really exciting about virtual reality is you really get to be a pioneer of it. We got to create some technology for a friend of mine, Spencer Stewart, has created this video game, that virtual reality video game called Cat Sorter VR.
Oh, I saw that one.
Yeah. Cat Sorter VR, where you got a conveyor belt. It's really simple, and you're in this virtual reality, and you're picking up these cats that are all mangled and misfortune, and you're pulling off their bad parts, and you got a bin of new cat parts, and you throw them on, and then you send them on down to Earth to be reincarnated on Earth or something. It's a pretty wild thing. We created some technology for it, where basically it was mixed reality, where we've got a camera that's filming our person playing the video game with the HTC Vive headset on and the handles, and they're playing it on a green screen, and then the camera has got an infrared motion tracker so that it is tracking in real time in the virtual world as well. So the camera's both filming the person and it's filming the virtual world, and then we composite them together so we can look into the virtual reality space. And yeah, basically him and I, we went to town and we figured out all the math and all the programming to make this happen, and we pounded it out in about a week. Wow. Because we had to get it ready for Virtual Reality LA. And then he went on to go do kind of a renegade advertising run at Virtual Reality LA, where he got a bunch of people to dress up like Christian protesters who are protesting the unethical treatment of these cats in Cat Sorter VR, and they stormed through it. And so they're going through this whole process right now of getting it up onto Steam. So if you have a chance, go on to the Steam website and check out Cat Sorter VR.
What is Steam? Do you know what the Steam site is?
Let's just do Steam space Cat Sorter VR if we're looking for the link.
Cat Sorter VR.
But I think for me personally, it's really exciting to be on the cutting edge of this technology.
Oh, yeah.
And after being in Hollywood, where so much of your work is trying to penetrate a very established hierarchy of filmmaking, it's really exciting to be in this kind of Wild West right now with virtual reality, where we get to create new technology, we get to create new processes and explore what's possible. And yeah.
It looks like their site is down right now. Is this the YouTube video? Is this the one that you created with them?
Yeah, this is the YouTube video.
Oh, okay.
And it's hilarious. It's tongue-in-cheek.
There you go. So what do you call this, the Cat Sorter?
Cat Sorter VR.
VR. Here you go. We'll put it up here.
Not BD, but no. That takes a whole nother level.
It does. It's a whole nother level. It's actually a PG show, not a VD show. Okay. Actually, that title will probably get more people. And so finally, didn't you just finish up some work, or can we talk about?
Oh yeah, so
all right.
Well, that'll be coming out, but I mean, we're doing some work with some of the producers from Adidas's social media team. Basically, I got some sponsorship from a new virtual reality camera, and how the camera works is it's the Views camera. Check it out; it's really cool. It's kind of the GoPro of the virtual reality world, and what it's made up of is 8 cameras that all end up making one stereoscopic image, which is basically an image for your right eye and an image for your left eye, which both wrap around in 360 degrees. So it gives you a full sense of depth. And we went and worked with Danny Gutierrez, a really awesome former Cirque du Soleil performer, breakdancer, parkour artist. And yeah, so we'll be coming out with that soon as I get off this other TV show and can wrap that up.
All right, I'm totally multitasking on you. Thanks for that, Parker. Jonathan Barney asks, is it possible to use the structure in a shorter presentation? It is, Jonathan. In fact, you just take the story cycle, the 10 steps, you can boil it down. Here's an example of it in 30 seconds. It's the spot we did for Goodwill of Central. Gosh, I just can't type, talk, host, and drink coffee at the same time. Goodwill of Central and Northern, I gotta get it right, Arizona. This is a recruiting spot, or a spot we did for people to come in and drop off their stuff. Not so much a recruiting spot, but donations is what I'm trying to say. And it's the 10-step story cycle process in 30 seconds. So I guess really the challenge for you, Jonathan, and anyone else that's interested, watch the spot, and then jump on here in comments and tell me if you can see the 10 steps, so you can identify where each of the 10 steps happen. In some cases, too, a 10-step or a chapter happens in a single edit. It takes the young boy from his ordinary world into an extraordinary world and gets the show going. So the whole idea about story structure, and I guess you see this too, from you've written a feature, you've created a sizzle reel out of it. So you've done the big hero's journey in that format, but you also do a lot of work in YouTube videos and marketing pieces for different groups over there that can only be 2 or 3 minutes long. In some cases, they're only 30 seconds long. So we just shared, the big thought with Save the Cat. How do you take story structure and condense it down? And what are the similarities you see in these small stories versus the big epic journeys? What do they both have to really connect with people?
Yeah, I mean, I guess when you're trying to simplify it down to the core bits, you have someone in a place with a problem, and it goes down, and then they find a solution and it comes back up. One of the advertising campaigns I did last year was for a company called Brain Balance, which is basically a therapeutic organization for kids who have whatever kind of challenges they're having.
Mm-hmm.
And
keep talking, I'm going to multitask.
Basically an approach for them to help these kids out. And give them this counseling and this basically diet and exercise. So much of that is diet and exercise. And then, working with the client was really like, let's keep it all really upbeat and happy and all this. And I was kind of basically trying to push them more towards the route of like, we need to see problem resolve. We need to go down. We need to see what the issues are and then have them come out, have Brain Balance be this transformational place where people can come to be healed.
And you probably experience the same thing that we all experience with clients is, no, we don't really want to focus so much on the problem. We don't want to have to take them there. We just want to show them what we can do for them, and everybody wins out. But they don't give them story when that happens.
Sure. And so what happened is, maybe I'm giving away too much, but the client said I wasn't even allowed to shoot it. And I really had to
shoot what?
To film the footage that I needed for that part of the story. Mm-hmm. And I had to really push to go and get that footage that I needed. And I was like, listen, we can edit it however you want. If we decide that that's not the route we want to go, that's fine. But I really don't want to leave this production studio without having that footage. Mm-hmm. And then basically pieced it together with an agency out of the East Coast. And we pieced together that story that basically brings them down to the darkness and then brings them up and, what is it? Give them the pain and then give them the release from the pain.
Yeah.
And we showed them one cut of that and they said, okay, you got it. Just roll with that. Do that. This is amazing.
Yeah. And it's basic story structure, 3 acts: setup, problem, resolution.
Yeah.
And our brains love that stuff.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, Parker, it's great having you here. I know you got to head north up to Arcosante. Any other last questions before we release the next Steven Spielberg? I don't even know if you aspire to be Steven Spielberg. Probably someone else.
Yeah. Spielberg with a little bit of Elon Musk or something.
Oh, okay. There you go. Let's see. I think that's about it. Anybody else here? Drew Degrassi showed up.
Hey, nice. Drew Degrassi.
Drew's son and Turner and Parker grew up together. So great to have you here. Rita, thank you, Parker. There you go. Very inspiring. Rita's out of Texas. And she's one of our wonderful EMSL students right now, doing great things with us in the program.
Awesome. Thanks, Rita.
All right. So let me just wrap up by letting you know we'll be back here again. Actually, yes, next Friday, 10 a.m. And I'm going to put this link up here one more time for you. Storytelling for Leaders. If you'd like to learn how you can do this in your business in a 6-month program, 1 full-day immersive intimate workshop where we really show you how to do this, and then 24 weeks of you applying story in your own life and in your own brand in a lot of different ways from some of the best minds in business storytelling for 6 months. It costs us only $1,250, $1,250 for 6 months of this kind of training. Go here, click here, register now. We have, 5 seats remaining because we're doing it here at Park & Co. in our conference room, and it's not enormous. We want to keep it small. As I mentioned, we have Mark Schenk from Anecdote out of Melbourne, Australia, who created this particular program, will be here co-hosting it, training with us on the 26th, which is 2 weeks from today. Be a great way to kick off your Memorial Day weekend. So hopefully you can join us. If you can't, if you know someone that might be able to use it, send them the link, send them to me. Happy to answer any questions on it. Any final parting words of story wisdom, Parker, for our audience out there, our intrepid storytellers?
Final words. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to go challenge boldly into the world.
And that's why my call to action is story on.
Story on, everybody.
Take
Cheers.
care.